You're listening to Campus Killings, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, Missing Persons,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime,
and Citizen Detective. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
Hello, Amy and listeners. Today's case takes us to Kutztown University in the heart of Amish country, Pennsylvania. While all the stories we cover on the show are tragic and sad, I think today's case is even more so because, as we're going to see, there was really no clear motive for this bright young man to have lost his life. In this case, Kyle Quinn was a victim of circumstance, and I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on the perpetrators and to unpack some potential reasons and theories to explain how and why this happened. So I'm talking to you, Amy, but I'm also talking to our listeners because we always enjoy the feedback. But before we get there, let's look at Kutztown University. Founded in 1866, Kutztown opened to students as the Keystone State Normal School for women with the goal of providing the Berks County area of Pennsylvania with skilled teachers. Now, we've talked about this in previous episodes, but a, quote, normal school was essentially a 19th century version of high school that was specifically geared towards creating teachers for one-room schoolhouses. As the agrarian area became more industrialized over the next several decades, more sophisticated teacher training was required. And in 1928, the school rebranded itself as the Kutztown State Teachers College, which offered bachelor degrees in teaching. And by the 1960s, the college went co-ed and grew into a full liberal arts institution offering degrees in a myriad of subjects. It became Kutztown University of Pennsylvania in 1983, offering over 130 undergraduate degrees and 30 graduate programs. So this school is one of 14 state universities across Pennsylvania and currently has around 12,000 students each year. I guess you would say this is a very nice mid-size liberal arts school, but also more than liberal arts because of the graduate offerings. And just so you know, the campus's location is one of the things that attracts many students, since it's located at the top of the town of Kutztown, which houses a robust downtown life with bars, restaurants, shops, and off-campus housing. Now, only a quarter mile outside of campus, the landscape becomes Amish farms, hosting a variety of country life experiences like the farmers markets, annual festivals, and fairs featuring handmade goods. So for students who like an urban experience but also want an opportunity to get away for some quiet, Kutztown offers both. But for sophomore Kyle Quinn, it wasn't the location or the history of Kutztown that made him choose it. It was the fact that his brother Dennis, with whom he was very close, was going there. Now, Kyle had begun his collegiate career at Penn State University. So after high school, Kyle was unsure what he wanted to do in life. I'll just give you a little background here. He loved music. He was an avid guitar player. He was a star soccer player, and he wrote copious original poems while he hiked Pennsylvania's many trails. But he didn't know exactly what he wanted to major in. Now, this is not uncommon. Amy, I don't know about you, but when I talk with some students, I try to tell them not to worry so much when they come in. Not to worry that they don't know what their major is. I tell them, take a couple courses that interest you. I think sometimes parents will tell their kids, you have to know what you want to do, right? You have to know what you want to do when you go in. I even tell them that when they're graduating. Don't worry about knowing what you're going to do for the rest of your life, because this is just the beginning of the rest of your life and you'll change your mind.
Yes. And I know you haven't changed much as far as you were always interested in this area, but I kind of bounced around a bit. I wasn't always, criminal justice. So yeah, I think.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, no, that's true. I've changed jobs, but yes, in terms of my interest, it's always been the same. Well, for these reasons, and because he was unsure, Kyle decided to go in as an undeclared freshman at Penn State, since he was a homebody and he was also able to commute from his home in Warminster. However, after his first year, he didn't feel like Penn State was for him. And since his older brother Dennis was going to Kutztown and really enjoying himself, Kyle decided to transfer. Seemed like a good idea. He'd taken a few courses at community college between the summer of his freshman and sophomore years and decided that history was something that really intrigued him. I loved my history classes too. He could see himself becoming a history teacher or a professional researcher at some point, and so he enrolled in Kutztown's history department to begin his sophomore year, and this was in August of 2007. Now, Dennis was ecstatic about having his younger brother join him. He thought this was going to be so much fun. All three Quinn siblings, Dennis, Kyle, and their younger sister Caitlin, worked summer hours at a local golf club. And as they picked up their last checks for the end of the season, Kyle and Dennis loaded up the family van with their dorm supplies to head out to school together. Co-workers described Kyle as excited to start this chapter of his life at his new university. Likewise, Kyle's parents, Leo and Denise, were happy that Kyle had chosen Kutztown, as it was a very safe school in a safe area.
He also had his brother there to kind of watch over him.
Oh, I'm sure that gave them such comfort. All told, the town's population when college was not in session was only about 5,000 people, and their one and only murder had been back in 1982. So this is considered a small, safe town. I want to live somewhere with 5,000 people. I really want to live in a small town.
You don't live in a small town?
I don't think so. No, Stroudsburg is pretty big.
It feels small.
I mean, it's not big like probably where you live, but 5,000 is kind of small. I would like that, I think. Now, Kutztown was also known for tight security during semesters with both on-campus public safety and university-specific police, as well as the town police who often worked in tandem with the university. So they had a lot of security here. The fact that Dennis was present to show Kyle around and keep an eye on him was also a comfort to their parents, as we said earlier. So it was a horrendous shock when Leo, Denise, and Caitlin got a knock on their door on the night of September 7th, 2007 by Warminster police. Only 2 weeks into the start of the fall semester, Kyle was dead. Cops could tell the family little on that fateful night, aside from the fact that Kyle had been pronounced dead around 3:30 a.m. at Lehigh Valley Hospital and that his death was under investigation. Can you imagine the shock of this? How could this have happened to a healthy 19-year-old?
It sounds like this came out of nowhere.
It absolutely did. And to figure out what happened, we have to go back to the day before. Thursday, September 6th had started as any other day for Kyle.
Sorry, every time we tell these stories, it always starts like, every other day before. So every time I'm starting my day, I'm just like, oh, just a normal day. And then I think about these stories. I'm like, oh no, a lot of days start normal.
I mean, these are the thoughts we're going to have with our occupation.
Yes.
I understand. So for Kyle on that morning, Thursday, September 6th, he went to class. He attended a concert on the campus lawn in the afternoon. And at night, he went to Dennis's off-campus apartment in downtown Kutztown to meet up with some mutual friends. The group had recently gone on a one-day hike up to Berks County Peak, and they were planning on doing a long through hike of the Appalachian Trail from Georgia all the way up to Maine the following summer.
I want to go. That sounds so fun.
Yeah, you know what's really cool? I mean, well, we live near some of these trails as well, but I used to also live many years ago in Greenwood Lake, if you recall, and that part of the Appalachian Trail was there. And where I used to hike, I would see a lot of these hikers doing the full hike all the way up, the East Coast. So yeah, it really is. Anyway, that was sorry, we digress. While the friends listened to music and hung out, talk swirled around plans of this trip as well as the start of the semester. And now, a brief word from our sponsors. Now, it's important to note here that Thursday nights tend to be the official party night in college towns, as you may recall.
Yes, Thursday was the biggest night, much bigger than Fridays or Saturdays.
Absolutely. And this is due to the fact that many students leave on Friday afternoons to go home for the weekend. And at my school, a lot of us just did not have classes on Friday. I don't think I ever took a Friday class.
Really? I didn't have the choice. A lot of my required classes, it was... Or maybe I just registered too late. I don't know. I remember not having that option.
I mean, maybe I did one class, but no, pretty much my college career. And as you know, I haven't taught a Friday class as a college professor as well. So I continued that tradition. So this particular Thursday, downtown Kutztown was packed with students enjoying the college nightlife. And since Thursday nights in College Town tend to be the busiest, as we said, and the most fun night of the week, crowds of non-students also tend to be attracted to joining the festivities. And this was true for a group of 5 young men from Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is located just around 30 miles from Kutztown, in case anyone is wondering. Allentown is about 45 minutes from me, so I have been to Allentown a few times, just so you know, because you always say, have you been to these places? Okay. The group consisted of the designated driver, Derek Hauser, 2 brothers, Terry and Kenny Klein, and 2 of their friends, Tim Gearhart and Andrew Weber. While Kyle and Dennis were ensconced in an apartment talking about the Appalachian Trail, this group of 5 decided to take a drive to the Kutztown bar Shorty's on that Thursday night to celebrate Terry Klein's birthday.
Now, do you think the name of that bar is, what's it called, paying homage to? Is that what the word is? Do you think the name of that bar is paying homage to the sub sandwiches from Wawa? For those of you who live in New Jersey, you know what I'm talking about. Or to the slang name for women?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I wouldn't have even thought of either, to be honest.
Maybe neither, I guess. But
I would have thought it was just some I don't know, weird. Sorry, I would have thought it was just some kitschy name, like a fun hangout, hanging out with your shorty.
Yeah.
No, that's not a thing.
It could be. I don't know,
but that's a good call for the Wawa one. Anyway, okay, so the 5 men were in their early 20s, and they were all natives to the Allentown area. They'd all met and become friends during middle school and high school, where they played on the basketball team together. On this particular drive, the 4 men, so excluding Derek, passed around a bottle of Jack Daniels, taking shots throughout the 30-minute drive to Shorty's bar. By all accounts, they were already quite drunk when they arrived, and they separated into 2 groups when they got into Shorty's. Derek and Andrew hung out at one end of the bar, while the brothers and Tim hung out at the other. Now, the group of 5 stayed at Shorty's until it closed at 2 a.m. on Friday, September 7th. But instead of just going home, they congregated on the sidewalk, where the brothers and Tim were allegedly hyped up from all the alcohol and unfortunately acting aggressively. It seemed that they wanted to fight someone. And Terry, the older of the brothers, began a verbal altercation with a random passerby about who was tougher and how many fights they'd been in. This is one of the unfortunate parts about all this alcohol, groups of men, late night, bars. It's an unfortunate consequence of the factors that, kind of converge. As Derek saw the situation escalating, he encouraged the men to get back in his vehicle so they could leave.
Because he's the only sober one, right?
As I understand it, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
But even as Derek got them back in the car and started to drive away, Terry accused Derek of disrespecting him and forced Derek to pull over so they could fight it out. Yeah, this is not going well. Now, while Derek was able to de-escalate Terry and keep driving, their friend Tim was not having it. He wanted to fight someone and spied 3 college students who were hanging out on the sidewalk. Shouting that he wanted to, quote, fuck some shit up, he forced Derek to stop the car and he got out and began a verbal altercation with the co-eds. The brothers joined him and Derek gave up trying to keep them in the car, instead driving with Andrew to find a parking spot about a block away. But before fists were thrown, a cop car came down the street and Tim and the brothers ran to Derek's car. So luckily for that group, the cops were able to kind of break this up before it started.
Okay, sign to go home.
A clear sign to go home. Unfortunately, around the same time Derek was trying to coax his drunk friends into the car outside of the bar, Kyle was leaving Dennis's apartment and making the mile-long walk home up Kutztown's main street back to his dorm. Yeah, this was around 2:15 a.m., and unfortunately, he crossed paths with Kenny around 2:30 a.m. So this was the halfway mark for Kyle to make it home. And at this point, Kyle walked past Kenny Klein, who was urinating on the sidewalk near an empty storefront. Now, Kyle was talking on his phone, and he was not at all interested in Kenny. But Kenny demanded to know who Kyle was speaking to. And the 19-year-old gave a quippy, "Not you," and kept on his way. But Kenny was raring for a fight with someone, and he grabbed Kyle's phone from his face and threw it into the street. At one point during this altercation, Tim grabbed a table leg that had been abandoned near the empty storefront and brutally assaulted Kyle, bludgeoning him on the left side of his face. I mean, this is a shocking assault that escalated, and Kyle went down immediately following being hit with this table leg, bleeding heavily from his head. While Tim and Kenny ran from the scene as soon as Kyle fell, Terry continued to stand over Kyle, shouting, quote, "I don't hear you talking anymore, bitch," along with other profane statements before spitting on him and walking away.
And just so I'm clear, this is a complete stranger that he's never met before.
Never met before. None of these boys had met him before.
Talk about wrong place at the wrong time. Jeez.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The only thing Kyle did wrong was innocently walk home. Just as Terry walked away, Corporal Paul Clearly of the Kutztown Police Department was doing his rounds and saw the body of a young man on the ground, as well as a car not far away, quickly backing up into the street. Using his police car, he quickly barricaded the vehicle so it couldn't drive away, and he called for backup and an ambulance immediately. So some good police work right there. Kyle was rushed to Lehigh Valley Hospital around 3 a.m., but doctors were unable to save him, pronouncing him dead at 3:36 a.m. So ironically, Amy, our researcher, Abigail, her husband is a police officer, her husband, Matt, and he went to Kutztown University, and he worked for their ambulance squad. And he was on call this very night. And if you can believe it or not, he ended up being the EMT who showed up on the scene. Yes, he gave Kyle life-saving measures on the sidewalk and drove over 200 miles an hour to get him to the hospital. Unfortunately, Matt said that from the outset, it didn't look like Kyle was going to survive. He still had a heartbeat when they arrived, but he was barely clinging to life. And they knew even as they raced to the hospital that he probably wasn't going to make it. The coroner ruled Kyle's death a homicide from blunt force trauma to the head, which had ruptured the left side cranial artery, causing him to bleed to death. Now, all 5 men were taken into custody, and it soon became clear that only 3 of them had been responsible for Kyle's assault. Yeah, remember there was 5 and 3 participated.
I'm going to bet Derek was not, right? The driver who kept trying to de-escalate?
That's correct. Derek and Andrew readily told police that they witnessed, citing the drinking and aggression by the brothers and Tim, as well as the 2 other altercations Terry and Tim had tried to start after leaving the bar at 2 a.m. So they were witnesses, but they did not participate in the assault. Derek stated that he yelled from the car for the 3 men to get back in the vehicle after Kenny threw Kyle's phone, but none of them responded to him. He and Andrew also explained that none of them knew the young man who the 3 had assaulted, and that essentially Terry, Kenny, and Tim were just looking for trouble early that morning. Derek and Andrew were released as witnesses, while Terry, Kenny, and Tim were brought before the district court in Reading, Pennsylvania, the following afternoon. The 3 men were arraigned and all told the district judge that they had prior arrests. So this is interesting here. Tim had a simple assault charge in Allentown in 2004 that he'd paid a fine and done 30 hours of community service for. Terry had a disorderly conduct charge in 2004 for fighting in a town called Whitehall, for which he'd paid a fine. And Kenny had a criminal mischief and disorderly persons charge in Allentown from 2006, for which he'd had to attend a first-time offenders program. So it seems very clear that all 3 have a history of aggression, but this fight had resulted in the death of an innocent 19-year-old. The three men were initially charged with aggravated assault, simple assault, and conspiracy, and the judge posted the bail, get this, at $10 million each.
Why wouldn't they charge him with murder? He had already passed away.
Well, sometimes when they're reviewing the evidence before they make a charge as murder, they want to just make sure they have all their ducks in a row, and they just want to make sure the evidence supports a murder charge. So the evidence clearly supported those charges at the time.
You said $10 million each. That's sending quite the message.
That is sending quite the message. Absolutely.
I'm surprised that the judge was allowed to have such a high bail amount for those charges.
Well, I'm sure that their lawyers probably were going to appeal that bail decision, but the case might have resolved itself first. And sometimes when you appeal a bail decision too, you don't get a hearing right away. I recently witnessed this happen in another case where the bail was set very, very high and there was an appeal on it, but they had to wait for a hearing, wait on a judge's decision. So the judge's decision will stand for a little bit of time. Now, in the immediate aftermath, Kutztown University's president emailed the entire student body about the incident, citing it as an off-campus attack on Kyle Quinn and that a private memorial service for the student would be forthcoming. The news shattered the student body, who later told the media they'd always felt very safe in Kutztown, both on and off campus. One shocked student told the press, "It's Amishville. This stuff doesn't happen here." But instead of letting fear immobilize them, Kutztown students jumped into action, forming student neighborhood watch parties in which volunteer students would band together in groups of 4 or 5 and walk Kutztown streets at night, reporting aggressive activity to the police or walking students back and forth to the dorms if they were alone and they wanted an escort. These watch parties went on for about a year and were finally disbanded when no other incidents occurred. Students and administrators also worked together in the weeks following the murder to do safety walks of the downtown to locate any unlit or potentially dangerous spaces and make changes to those areas. Likewise, the school had a consulting firm come in to look at what other types of safety measures could possibly be put into place to prevent anything from happening in the future. So the school was taking this quite seriously. The report that they generated suggested that extra enforcement of laws surrounding public intoxication and drunk driving on Thursday and Friday nights would help, as well as creating a well-lit safety corridor from campus to the town so students didn't have to walk dark sidewalks or side streets basically to get back to their dorms at night. About a year after Kyle's murder, the university and the town were working together to bring these suggestions into action. The university hosted a private memorial for Kyle in which hundreds of students filled the arena, lighting white candles in his memory as his family read his beautiful poems to the crowd. Now, while most hadn't known Kyle, remember he'd only been on campus for about 2 weeks, there was a reported sense of solidarity in that one of their own had been taken, and due to the random nature of this murder, a rampant fear that it could really happen to any of them. The Kutztown University Press also printed chapbooks of all of Kyle's original poetry and handed them out to the mourners at the end of the ceremony. Just for anyone who doesn't know, chapbooks are small printed collections of poetry that usually have no covers. They're considered street literature, so they're a very popular mode of poetry publication. And now, a brief word from our sponsors. Kyle's funeral was held a week after his untimely death at the St. John Bosco Church in Hatboro, Pennsylvania, where every pew was full of family, friends, neighbors, and fellow students who came to say goodbye. Kyle was buried in Hatboro Cemetery with a headstone bearing his photograph and the phrase, quote, "I have found the path home and now I am safe," which was a line from one of his original poems.
Oh, so sad.
Now let's turn to the men responsible for Kyle's death. Since none of the men who'd attacked Kyle could make bail, they sat in jail while awaiting trial. After Kyle's toxicology report came back showing no alcohol, drugs, or other substances in his system that may have contributed to his death, Tim Gearhart was charged with first-degree murder, and the Klein brothers were charged with third-degree murder.
Now I understand.
Now you had asked before.
Yeah, now I understand the answer to the question, too, because they had to make sure that it was actually the blunt force trauma that caused the death, not something else. Got it.
Correct.
Okay.
As they were brought into court to hear their new charges, they were reportedly crying and acting very emotional. Despite the men's emotional displays, DA Mark Baldwin seemed unmoved, citing that Kyle's murder was willful and deliberate, and he denied all three bail and sent them back to Berks County Jail. In October of 2008, a little over a year after Kyle's murder, Tim Gearhart took a plea deal for third-degree murder charges and stood before a judge for sentencing. And while several witnesses attested on Tim's behalf that he was a troubled young man who had been working on turning his life around before this incident with Kyle, it was not enough to sway the judge towards any leniency. Tim Gearhart was sentenced to 20 to 40 years for third-degree murder, as well as 20 years of probation to follow. After his sentencing, Tim addressed the Quinn family, saying how sorry he was for what had happened to Kyle and that he blamed his actions on a, quote, indulgence of alcohol. He said that he was working on bettering himself as a person in the prison system. He also said that he prayed for the Quinn family daily from his prison cell, and he asked the judge if he could keep the victim impact statements written by the family that were read to him during the sentencing, to which the judge granted his request. That's an interesting one. I've never heard that before. Have you?
Nope. I'm not sure exactly what to make of it.
Well, there's a couple things. You could say that perhaps it was a sign of true remorse. Perhaps he wanted to remind himself what he had done. Or you could say, if you're cynical, you could say that perhaps it was just for show. I'd like to believe the former. While the family was satisfied with the sentence, many students on Kutztown campus were not, citing that Tim Gearhart should have gotten a life sentence for what he'd done. What do you think about this, Amy? Any thoughts? How we feel about this sentence?
This is a tough one. I don't agree that he should have gotten a life sentence, especially given that he's showing remorse, although we don't know if it's true remorse or not. As always, I'd like to see what he does while he's incarcerated.
Yeah, of course. I do think that this was a fair sentence that he was given. Remember, it's a big range, too. We're talking about 20 to 40 years here. So 20 years if he makes really good use of his time, but 40 if he does not. I do think this was an appropriate sentence. A month later, in November of 2008, brothers Terry and Kenny Klein opted to go to trial. They were tried together as co-defendants with the charges of third-degree murder, conspiracy to commit third-degree murder, aggravated assault, and conspiracy to commit aggravated assault. So a lot of serious charges here. After several days of testimony and 5.5 hours of deliberation, the jury acquitted the brothers of third-degree murder, but found them guilty on the counts of conspiracy and aggravated assault. In the end, Amy, they were sentenced to 20 to 40 years for the conspiracy and 20 years of probation for the aggravated assault. So they wound up with the same exact sentence as Tim. After the brothers' sentencing, the DA explained to the press that based on the evidence, all three men were out looking for a fight the night Kyle was killed, and therefore all three men share responsibility in the murder. However, there was contention from the brothers' defense team over them getting the same exact sentence as Tim Gearhart, as Tim was the one who actually fatally wounded Kyle and not Kenny or Terry. So do we have any thoughts on this, Amy, as well? They are both convicted. Kenny and Terry are convicted. They were absolutely part of this fight, but it was Tim who delivered the fatal blows, and essentially all the men got the same sentence. Is this appropriate?
I don't know. I don't think it's appropriate. I'm not saying the other two should have had a lighter sentence, but perhaps Tim should have had a more severe sentence.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, this is what happens also, though. This is what we call, in our field, we call it kind of the trial penalty.
Yeah.
You exercise your right to go to trial. Sometimes the punishment can be harsher in the end.
That's not fair.
Fair or not, you could look at it this way, too. Kyle lost his life, an innocent kid walking down the street, and there was this mob mentality, and the three of them were kind of inciting each other. So perhaps it is fair after all. Any way you look at this, lives are lost, families are destroyed, and it's a tragedy. And while Terry Klein filed an appeal of his sentence in 2017, I couldn't find any record of it being granted. As of this podcast recording, all three men are still incarcerated as far as I could find. So how can we explain this wrong place, wrong time murder in a safe area that was Kutztown? Well, I couldn't find much on the three men's upbringing, I did find that the Klein brothers were raised by a single mother and that Kenny had dropped out of high school in the 9th grade. We also know that all three men had a criminal history that included some type of violence. At the time of Kyle's murder, Kenny was working as a cook in an Allentown restaurant to support his baby daughter and trying to get his GED. Another collateral consequence. One of them has a daughter who's now lost a father. We see this secondary victimization and the trickle-down effect here. However, Kenny did have documented issues with aggression, particularly when he was drinking. Now, Terry had graduated high school but had trouble holding down a job, and at the time of Kyle's murder, he was unemployed. I couldn't find anything public about Tim Gearhart's past other than his arrest, which I noted before, for simple assault in 2004. There was also evidence in court testimony that Tim was essentially illiterate, or at least he could only read at a very low level, and stated that he only had a limited understanding of his written rights. So it's unclear how much schooling Tim had, or if he may have had an undisclosed learning issue.
Seems like he likely did.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. There was also some evidence that though the five men were going out to celebrate Kenny's birthday on that fateful night, they also had a friend die just a week before they went out to Kutztown.
Oh.
So could this been an expression of their anger, of their grief from losing their own friend, their frustration?
Still
and
doesn't
this
make
is the
it
way.
Okay.
No,
I know
no.
that's not
But
what you're saying, but yeah.
No, of course not. In criminology, we're looking for an explanation, but not a justification. Are there, theories to explain why these three men might have singled Kyle out that night? Especially since they had altercations with two other groups before finding Kyle. So it's not Kyle.
Yeah.
If not Kyle, it would have been someone else.
Yeah, I think it was just the timing, unfortunately, for Kyle. He was out, they were looking for something and Kyle was right there, unfortunately.
And this is classic routine activities theory when we talk about it, right? Motivated offenders. These guys are angry. They're aggressive. They have way too much alcohol. They have a history of violence. They come across a suitable target, which was Kyle, unfortunately, or it could have been someone else, but it was Kyle at the time. And there's no guardians, right? There's no one around. It's late at night.
It sounds like there was a police officer not far. Unfortunately, not close enough.
It was not far. Remember, there was another police officer who broke up a potential fight they had with another group before they came upon Kyle. And then the police officer came upon Kyle pretty quickly. So this was a safe town. It's just an unfortunate tragedy all around.
I'm not blaming the police, but in hindsight, it makes you think, like, you wish the police would have taken these guys in, knowing that they were just up to no good that night, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. It's very hard to look back and see what could have been prevented when we know what happened, but impossible to see forward, right? Well, unfortunately, no amount of explanations can bring Kyle Quinn back, but his family has worked hard to make sure that his legacy lives on. Following Kyle's murder, his family began the Kyle Quinn Memorial Scholarship for graduating seniors of Kyle's high school, William Tennant High. As of a 2015 article, the scholarship has awarded over $30,000 to William Tennant graduates in Kyle's name. Likewise, in 2015, Kyle's parents presented the town of Warminster with a check for over $6,000 to build the Kyle Quinn Memorial Skate Park. And over the last decade, the family has held memorial walks, golf outings, and other fundraisers that have provided over $45,000 to the skate park and scholarship to keep Kyle's legacy alive in their community. If any of our listeners live in the Warminster area and would like to be a part of the fundraising efforts for the Kyle Quinn Memorials, you can check out the Five Ponds Golf Club for information on their annual Kyle Quinn Memorial Golf outings. Likewise, if you know anyone who is struggling with alcoholism, we invite you to check out the NIAA, or the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse, at niaaa.gov for more information and resources for treatment. Today's case It's hard. It's hard when it's always hard when there's a tragedy, but it's especially hard when it's so senseless and so brutal and so many lives are lost.
And there's really nothing that Kyle could have done differently. He was, going about his daily routines, right? And just unfortunately, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I know we say that too, but it's unfortunate because it does sound like, wrong place, wrong time. It was no wrong place, wrong time. We should actually probably say these guys were at the wrong place at the wrong time, right? They shouldn't have been there. And yeah, I do. Cases like today kind of weigh heavily on me because I just think the senselessness of it all. I hope that others did hear this story. I hope that others know about this story. I hope spreading the information can help in some small way to prevent tragedies like this going forward. It's really the best that we can do other than honoring Kyle with the many legacies and charities and walks and outings that his parents continue to hold in his honor.
Before we go today, if you'd like to support Campus Killings, consider subscribing to the show with an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcasts.
Your subscription will get you VIP access to all the shows on the network that not only includes hundreds of episodes of ad-free listening, but also bonus content and early access to episodes.
For only $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year, you'll unlock a variety of listener benefits, and you'll be supporting this show in the process.
Head over to Apple Podcasts and search for either Campus Killings or AbJack, and you can start your subscription with a free trial.
Your support is greatly appreciated.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today, and we hope you'll join us on the next episode of Campus Killings.
Campus Killings is hosted by Dr. Megan Sachs and Dr. Amy Schlossberg, with research and writing by Abigail Belcastro. It's produced by Mike Morford of AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to follow Campus Killings on social media. You can find Campus Killings on Twitter with the handle @CampusKillings or on Facebook at facebook.com/Campus Killings. You can also visit the show's homepage at campuskillings.com. Be sure to tune in every other Saturday for new episodes of Campus Killings.